So I invite Adriana Patricia Arias Aguila to show the results of a study songs of a fishing bat, echolocation called variation of the greater bulldog bat across the Neotropics. Adriana? Yes, you are ready.
Hello, I'm going to start. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'm going to present some of the results of one of the chapters of my PhD thesis, which entitles Songs of a Fishing Bat, Echolocation called Variation of the Greater Bulldog Bat Across the Neotropics. My co-authors are Bernal Rodriguez Rivera and Maria Joao Ramos Pereira. Well, climate is a crucial factor for the evolution of signals and sensory systems, and particularly for bat echolocation cones, mostly due to its effect on atmospheric sound absorption. The atmospheric attenuation of sound involves a complex relationship between temperature, humidity, and frequency. And particularly for high frequency sounds, like most of echolocation calls of bats, high frequencies suffer a more pronounced atmospheric attenuation when compared to low frequency sounds. In this graphic, you can see the atmospheric attenuation expressed as decibels per meter here at the left. And on the bottom, you can see the absolute humidity expressed as percent of water vapor. The lines represent different frequencies. In this case, we're going to compare a frequency of 10 kilohertz versus a frequency of 100 kilohertz. And what you can see is that as higher the frequency, higher the atmospheric attenuation experienced by the sound. Also, you can see in this graphic that the relationship between with the humidity is a nonlinear relationship. After a certain point, the atmospheric attenuation starts to decrease, and this will depend mostly on the frequency of the sound. So if we think about the geographic range of a bat species and the differences in humidity and temperature across its range, these differences will select for different echolocation frequencies. So that atmospheric attenuation due to these climatic factors, temperature and humidity is minimized. Some of the hypotheses that has been proposed trying to relate these changes in sensory systems or signals related to climate, we have the sensory driver hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, given the conditions, for example, of high temperature and high humidity, we will have conditions of high atmospheric attenuation, and we will expect frequency sounds we are going to expect sounds of lower frequencies. Inversely, under conditions of lower temperature and lower humidity, we will have conditions of low atmospheric attenuation, and we will expect sounds of higher frequencies. So in this case, the species echolocation call frequencies will vary along the latitudinal gradient or along the geographic range in response to different conditions of atmospheric attenuation. Another of the hypotheses is known as the James rule, which is a reformulation of the Bergmann's rule. In this case, for a single species, body size will increase with decreasing humidity and temperature. In this case, the divergence in cold frequency will be a result of climate-mediated variation in body size, and there is also an inverse correlation with echolocation frequency. So according with this hypothesis, under climate conditions of high temperature, high humidity, we will expect smaller animals, and by this inverse correlation, they will emit higher frequencies. Inversely, under climate conditions of lower temperature and lower humidity, we will find bigger animals, and by this inverse correlation, they will emit lower frequencies. So the focal species of our study is the fishing bat, or the greater bulldog bat, Noctilio. Now you are listening to its echolocation cones. Basically, this species emits two types of cones, one that we named the constant frequency cones and the frequency modulated cones. This bat is classified as a trolling bat species. As you see in the video, the bat makes like a trolling movement over the water surface. It has morphological adaptations like bigger claws for capturing their prey. That consists, as its name says, on fishes or aquatic insects. This species has a wide distribution, going from Mexico to Argentina and Southeast Brazil, and is found in humid environments like rivers or coastal marine habitats. In 1973, Davis proposed 3 areas of geographical differentiation based on several morphological characteristics, and he proposed also 3 subspecies with different sizes. Noctilio leporinus mastivus in the northern part of the species distribution, being an intermediate in size subspecies. Noctilio leporinus in the middle part of the species distribution, being the smallest of the subspecies, and Noctilio leporinus rufescens in the southernmost part of the species distribution, being the largest of the species. Because differences in the echolocation frequencies or in the acoustic variation can be related also with evolutionary history. We consider also the phylogeographic studies, mainly the study of Can of 2014, where it's proposed that there are 2 monophyletic lineages with a partial correspondence with the subspecies. One of these lineages correspond to Noctilio leporinus mastivus from populations of Mexico, Central America, and the Greater Antilles. And the other lineage will correspond with the subspecies Leporinus and Leporinus rufescens, mainly the South American populations. So what we do was we used the echolocation codes from different bat populations of North, Central, and South America. And we tested if the differences in humidity and temperature across the geographic range of the species, and if the differences in body size will result in different call frequencies. So summarizing our hypothesis and predictions, according to the sensory-derived hypothesis, we will expect a climate-mediated frequency variation, and according to the James rule, we will expect climate-mediated body size variation. So under the climatic conditions of high temperature, high humidity, and high atmospheric attenuation, according to the sensory drive, we will see lower frequencies emitted by bigger animals. And under these same climatic conditions, according to the James rule, we will expect smaller animal frequencies. Inversely, under conditions of lower temperature, lower humidity, and lower atmospheric attenuation, according to the sensory drive, we will see higher frequencies emitted by smaller bats. And according to the James rule, we will expect bigger animals emitting lower frequencies. Our data consists of measurements of the flat frequency portion of both types of pulses. Here you can see within this orange box what is the flat frequency portion of the CF pulse and of a FM pulse. We use subspecies as a proxy of body size, and the climatic data were temperature, relative humidity, absolute humidity, and we also calculate the atmospheric attenuation for both types of pulses and for each locality. These are just a few of the analysis that we done. We investigate the acoustic geographic variation between sites, and the effects of climate and body size on the acoustic variation of the flat frequency portion. So this figure resumes, or sorry, summarizes the model that we use. So we test the effects of the environmental variables. We did principal component analysis and used the first 2 dimensions. We use subspecies as a proxy of body size, and we use as random effects file nested within locality, because our recordings were done with different equipments and at different times. So what we find was that we find differences between localities. We sample a total of 17 localities, more than 1,700 CF echolocation calls from more than 200 sequences, more than 2,000 FM echolocation calls from 23 sequences. And as you can see in this graph, we have in the upper portion of the graph, we have the constant frequency calls, and in the bottom, we have the frequency modulated calls. And you can see that we have differences between most of the localities with some exceptions, like for example, some calls of Leporinus mastivus and some calls of Leporinus rufescens are quite similar. But in general, the echolocation calls of the subspecies Noctilio leporinus leporinus are the highest in frequency, which correspond to the smallest of the subspecies. So we find that climate and body size partially explain the acoustic variation of the species of their search echolocation calls, with humidity represented mainly by the first principal component, with an important role on the climatic differentiation between the localities. We also find that the body size has a strong effect on the frequency variation of both CF echolocation calls and FM echolocation calls. So summarizing our findings, for the subspecies Noctilio leporinus mastivus, we observe what the sensory drive hypothesis proposed, with a frequency variation in this flat frequency portion of the calls mediated by the climate. We see lower frequencies emitted by bigger animals. And for the subspecies Noctilio leporinus leporinus and Noctilio leporinus rufescens, we observe what the James rule proposed, with body size variation mediated by climate, as we see smaller animals emitting higher frequencies in the case of leporinus, and bigger animals on the colder climate conditions emitting lower frequencies, as we saw for the subspecies Noctilio leporinus rufescens. And with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thanks. Can open discussion.
Should I stop sharing now?
So I have a question, and do you think to include also the power of the click, the intensity of the click in your analysis, not only the frequency?
We not include the intensity of the calls in our analysis. We just include the frequency, but we also we make like a previous filter, like a quality of filter. So very quiet calls were not included in the analysis. Only calls with a good quality.
Okay. So I see a question by David Savage, but you see the no, this is maybe an older question. So we have time. Okay, we can move on to the other